the session on Publishing Saga, Holding Up the Microphone. And we are basically going to discuss how voices that are usually unheard and or ignored are being brought up into the mainstream and more. And obviously our moderator, Trisha, will give you more details about what exactly the discussion is going to be like. Without taking much of your time, I would like to quickly introduce Trisha and the panelists. So Trisha De Niyogi is the Chief Operating Officer at Niyogi Books. In her current role, one of the things she focuses on is business development. While on the one hand, she has started new lists of fiction, non-fiction, and translated books and talking literature, art, architecture, history, and culture from the Orient to the rest of the globe. On the other hand, she has been acquiring high quality content from around the world, from Indian subcontinent's readership as well. Thank you so much for everything you do with Niyogi, Trisha. We really value the books and all the voices that you bring out. Our first panelist is Urvashi Butalia of Zubaan Books. Urvashi Butalia is a publisher and a writer, co-founder of Kali for Women, India's first feminist publisher and now director of Zubaan. She's also author of the award-winning oral history of Partition, The Other Side of Silence, Voices from the Partition of India. She has received many awards, among which are the Pandora Award for Women's Publishing, the French Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres, and the Padma Shri. Welcome, ma'am. Our next panelist is Rita Krocha from Penthrill. Rita Krocha is a poet, author, and journalist. She's also the founder of Penthrill Publication House in Kohima, which promotes Naga writers. We also have a section of messages from Ruby Hembrom, who is the founder and director of Adivaani, an archiving and publishing outfit of and by Adivasis. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Trisha, if you could take over and introduce the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lasya. But before I begin, I want to start with a lament, a Tagore's lament. O mor durbhaga desh, jader korecho অপমান, অপমানে hote hobe, tahader shobar shoman. My unfortunate land, those you have daily disdained, one day you must find yourself equal to them. Tagore here is talking about a future where we must, all of us, must be on the same level. And I'm happy to see that the beginning has already been made in various fields, including publishing. But we must note that we hear stories that are shared with us. We haven't heard everything. Many a times, the same stories are told over and over through different mediums, and perhaps because they're popular. But it creates an expectation of one path, a singular point of view, one story to tell. What Tagore understood 100 years back, we still find it existing. People from all different backgrounds have been pushed aside, marginalized, and not given a platform to share their unique perspectives. And hence, let us address the topic in hand, holding up the microphone, a publishing saga, with the veteran publisher and a role model for several young women like me, Urvashi Butalia, Vishu, Rita Krocha, Ruby Hembrom. Unfortunately, Ruby could not join us today because she's traveling, but we managed to catch up with her earlier this week, and we managed to get her to send us her videos. Also, as a publisher at Niyogi Books, I try my best to have as diverse a voice as I can through the books I publish. However, I find great inspiration in their work, as well as works of other publishers like Navayana, Yoda Press, Panther Paws, and many others. I'm also glad that Indian Novels Collective and House of Belongg have also upheld the mantle in doing what is a necessity today. With this, I would like to begin with my first question. My first question is to Urvashi ma'am. I cannot see ma'am. Is she here? Yes, she's here. As Albert Einstein said, We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. How do you see publishers like you flipping the script?
Hi, Trisha. Thank you so much. And thanks to Belongg and the Indian Novels Collective for setting up this panel. So, Trisha, if you just look around you, even today, look at you. We've got Ruby, who should have been here. She isn't here, but we've got her voice. We've got Rita. You look around at the publishing world, it's populated today by amazing young women who are doing all sorts of interesting things. So clearly, the goalposts, everything's shifted. So when we started in 1984, you could count the number of women on the fingers of two hands. They were not in executive positions. There were a few editors. Mostly they were in admin positions. So that's a major change. And that is, we started on a premise. The premise has completely shifted now. Yeah. Similarly, in the ways in which, in the publication of, say, marginalized voices, there are so many younger publishers. You yourself named some Panthers for Navayana, Yoda, so many others who are Niyogi, who are doing really interesting stuff and who are bringing ever newer voices to something. To the process started by, say, some publishers several years ago, and therefore enriching our literature. So I think the coin flips all the time. These are just two instances, but there are many other things I could talk about, but I think the coin flips all the time. Your realities change all the time. And really what you have to do is to keep pace with them, understand them, listen to what's going on, and then work within that. So that's the challenge of it, really.
Yes. Even today, right now, I started reading translation perhaps quite late, maybe in my early 20s. But since then, I've read books like Breathing Gender or Translating Caste. I don't remember the authors right now, but these things in translation studies also remind us that more and more people are getting conscious, and I think it's a great thing that I've learned from my parents as well as from everybody I've come across and spoken with. But I'd like to ask one question to Rita. Rita, can I see you? Unfortunately, yes. Okay. So you are a publisher based out of Northeast. While Northeast is a very administrative construct, we cannot ignore the multilingualism or the multi-ethnicity of that place or the region. What is your strategy to publish? Yes.
Thank you, Trisha. Though we have so many languages here being spoken in Nagaland, I think it also helps that English is the official language. All the books that we have been publishing so far is in English. And I also think the majority of the Naga population would be more comfortable reading and writing in English. This also offers a great opportunity for a universal audience. And although our book market is quite limited and confined to the state and a few scattered places in the Northeast region, there is a viable scope to market our books outside as well. But honestly, when I started with publishing, I didn't have any strategy in place. It was just my love for books and writing that sparked that interest. I'm glad that venturing into publishing, regardless of how small it is, has provided the much needed platform for many upcoming writers in the States.
And editors and designers that you work with in your organization. And yes, the first time I met you, I was already inspired by the work that you were doing. So it's been more than a year now, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. But now I wanted to ask this question about our sustainability. And this is a question to both of you, to Urvashi ma'am first. We all have a desire for inclusive publishing, but real problem is to find a symbiotic relationship between the needs of a commerce of the thing to sustain ourselves financially, as well as to come out with more diverse voices. And you've done that since the inception of Zubaan. You've given voices to represented voices of women. And so, what is the secret of your success?
Sorry, I didn't realize I had muted myself. Hi, Rita, great to see you. Trisha, I don't know if we can call it success. The thing is that it's hard, even today. I mean, we've been publishing for over 35 years, and we haven't gone under, but it is hard to keep your head above water. I think that being clear, as Rita was mentioning a minute ago, that what you want to do is important, and it's not money that is the driving motive. So if you can actually even just break even, then you're fine. So we haven't ever tried to sort of get into the profit motivation thing. And there have been times when we have made losses, and there have been times when we have broken even, and there have been times when we have gained a little bit. So it kind of evens out, and it helps to have readers who are interested, committed, and who will go out seeking the kind of books that we do, and the kind of books that so many other independent publishers do. And it's also kind of, you're always faced with the reality that the path of getting an investor is never open to you, because really no investor is interested in this kind of thing. Yes. So that's a reality check that keeps you straight and you keep your overheads low, or at least you try. And I think what also helps is to have really interested, committed, involved colleagues who help to keep, who believe in the ideology, and who are not there themselves for profit, but because they believe in what you're doing. And that really makes for a collective functioning, which is very precious. So I figure that even if we go under in the next X number of years, the thing is that we'll have done our best. And after that, okay, if you don't create a publishing house that lasts 300 years, well, big deal, it's okay.
But the books are always going to last, I'm sure.
Books will last, those voices will be there.
Yes. That's what I feel is the most satisfying of this work, that at least those voices will be heard somewhere in the rest of the world, definitely. Rita, would you like to share your views as well?
Yeah, so for me, I got into publishing with zero business knowledge. Like I knew literally nothing about it. And when I started, it was just books, as I mentioned earlier, my love for books. And so it was quite a challenge. Like with every book that I publish, it's like a lesson for me. And but in the last few years, I've also learned that if I'm going to stay in this industry, I would also have to, sustain myself. And but thankfully, I also noticed that a lot of upcoming writers come to us with their manuscripts, and with more books, we have also been able to sustain ourselves. So I hope it will just get better and better in the years to come.
Absolutely. But let me go back to one thing which Urvashi ma'am said about interested and involved colleagues. Now, when we talk about human resource development and actually skill development and human resource enhancement, I've followed your work for so long that I know a lot is happening apart from your internships that happen and everything. How do you think this has ultimately contributed to your publishing program?
Trisha, you're asking me this question?
Yes, Urvashi ma'am.
Okay. You have to stop calling me ma'am, actually.
Okay.
So, I think this actually goes back to the earlier question you asked about the idea you start out with is not the idea that the Einstein quote that you used. Because to me, one of the biggest educations has been that this idea of skill development relates as much to the people who work, say, in my organization in Zubaan, as it does to me, because I started out with a certain set of skills. They're almost obsolete now. I started out with a certain set of ideas, and so much has changed around now. So it is actually an obligation on the person who runs an organization to learn from the younger colleagues who come with new ideas and to develop your own skills in understanding new realities, because we don't know that. So I think skill development is a mutual kind of thing. And one of the things that happens to small publishers and people who are under-resourced like us is that we don't have the money to put into helping our colleagues to access different kinds of skill development initiatives that would be good for them. So then you're placed in a situation of, having to choose, and you don't have the luxury of having a colleague go away to attend a course because one person gone is one person out of the office. That's a hard choice. But you have to make those kinds of choices. And I just hope that we will be able to do that more in the future. But even for somebody like us, who is, say, by comparison with Rita, we are much better placed, right? Even though we are under-resourced and all of that, but she's basically just starting out with very little money and all of that. So even for us, it's difficult. So I can imagine what it would be like for newer, younger publishers, even more so. And I have this dream that maybe we can help each other. By helping to develop each other's skills, maybe we can work together. So that is a dream. Maybe it'll come true one day.
Yes, definitely. I'll come to that a little later because I have a question on that specifically. But before that, I had asked Ruby a question, and I'll read out the question right now, and we'll have her answer as well. Now, it's about a cause. We have taken a niche for ourselves. We might call it a niche. We've taken a direction for ourselves. And so I asked Ruby, will the cause of Adivasi literature be properly served from the platform of a specialized publishing house only? Or do you think it is time mainstream publishing houses take up Adivasi literature in a big way, as they did in the case of Dalit literature? So if Yoshita, if you could play the video, video one, I think that's the answer. Can't hear her, and it's going very fast.
Yoshita, you might have to connect your audio and start replaying. Unmute yourself if you can. Yeah, connect your audio and unmute yourself.
Can't hear.
Yoshita, can you increase your system volume? Not just the Zoom volume.
Can't hear.
Still the same problem. Yoshita, there's this little tick box on the bottom left, which has you have to reshare the screen and close it right now, stop screen sharing and reshare it. And there's a tick box saying share screen audio. You'll have to activate that. You'll have to stop screen sharing and reshare. Sorry for the interlude. Yeah, we'll just be back.
Yeah. Should I go ahead or should we till this is solved?
Yeah. I think if you can just move forward and
Yeah.
Yoshita, I don't know what exactly. So yeah, if you can just move forward and we'll play it back.
Wait a second. I think
you figured it
figured it out.
Okay.
Let's just wait for 5 seconds more. Because the answer is interesting and I'd like our discerning audience to actually hear her.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Yeah.
I'd say that the history and presence of Adivasis has been one of discrimination, marginalization, exploitation, and invisibilization, and that includes our literature as well. My publishing is an act of preservation and resilience, addressing the question of how will we recognize we are Adivasi when everything that makes us so is taken from us or lost. In that, they automatically become literary entities, memory and commentaries on Adivasi being. This is a testimony to our publishing perspective and approach, which may or may not resonate with other independent or mainstream publishing ventures. And in that, I know it's not for me to say what anyone or the mainstream should or should not do to serve Adivasi literature. What I know is we're not asking to be served, rescued, honored, or become a diversity box checked.
Yes. To that, I have my next question for Rita. Now, we were talking about challenges. What are the challenges that you face while publishing from Nagaland? Has digitalization helped you increase the reach across the country? Because we sitting in Delhi, I think most of ancillary industries and almost everything is centered in Delhi. It's interesting to know that you published from Nagaland, and that's why this question, this inquisitiveness, this curiosity to know how it works for you.
Yeah, from my experience, the greatest challenge in publishing books in Nagaland has been the lack of readership. The book market is painfully slow, so you need a lot of patience to have your book sold, and only years later be able to make up the capital you invested in for a particular book. There are times that I had to withdraw some book titles from some stores because those books have been around for a long period of time. Such moments can take a toll on you. But I think it's been a journey of ups and downs, but I think the key is to focus on the positive things and just keep going. Bad sales aside, the good news is that I see many new, fresh, emerging voices coming up now. Along with the increase in the number of writers, I see that the number of readers has also increased, which is a good news for the entire literature community in Nagaland. Looking back, I think it was because of the lack of platform for writers. As a young kid, I didn't even know that I wanted to be a writer because nobody talked about writing as a profession. And then writing was still not considered a worthy profession. I remember working for the newspaper and everybody around me advised me to appear for competitive examinations. I'm glad I didn't listen to anybody when it came to following my dream. Many elders and relatives in the village still don't consider what I do a job at all. But with time, I have also realized that I'm not here to please them or prove anything to anyone, But what matters most is that I do what I do wholeheartedly with passion and interest, and I am able to make a difference to somebody's life. In publishing books, I am more and more convinced that this is one of the greatest gifts we can leave behind for generations to come. For in telling our stories, we also leave behind a wealth of knowledge for our children to read and learn about the very culture that they come from. About the other question, I think we have not. Yes,
like
I think we.
Amazon and other platforms as well.
Yeah, so I think we have not done enough when it comes to reaching out to readers across the country, but the social media platforms that we use have really helped us reach out to more readers, both here in Nagaland and beyond.
Okay. Yeah. So that will come to a next question which will come. I'll come to that later, very sequentially, because my next question would actually be, what can readers do to actually support independent presses? For example, what can I do to support independent presses? That's the first question that I'd like to ask. Like yourself.
Yeah, I guess the greatest support that you can extend to us is by buying our books and reading them. Also recommend it to another reader who might enjoy it.
And how do I buy your books? Is it available on Amazon? Do we?
Yes, they are available
on Amazon.
Yes.
So, okay, so I'll come to those other problems, challenges a little later. But to Urvashi ma'am, same question. How has the rise of the digital medium and online transaction facility and now the new thing of virtual book fairs helping your publishing effort? Do you find it conducive for Indian independent publishers?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't know much about virtual book fairs because they have started to happen now. What they do provide is some interesting conversations and interesting exposure, especially if they are trade fairs, like Frankfurt, which is between publishers. So you can, you needn't spend that kind of money on making a visit there, but you can still share your lists and see if people are interested in that sense. The digital medium, I think, has been, again, both good and bad. So good in the ways of expanding the possibilities of selling your books, because for independent publishers, getting into bookshops is very hard because bookshops have limited space, and by and large, they only want to keep the big sellers, and we are not people who publish those big sellers. So for them to give space to our books is a battle. And for the distributors who distribute books, to put books of small publishers there is also something that really does not happen very much. So in that sense, the digital can help you to reach out to readers across across borders, whether they're international or national. E-books and print on demand sort of things can also help you to keep your lists in print and reach out. And they're available on different platforms and can be also sold from your own websites. What the downside of it often is that, and this happens anyway, but perhaps happens quicker with the digital, is that things get pirated, picked up, and of course, then they're freely shared. And while the sentiment behind free sharing is a sentiment that knowledge should be free and the big guns are seen as being exploitative in profiting from knowledge, etc., the reality of it is that it impacts the smaller publishers much more deeply and hits us really hard, but you can't really make that argument because the moral high ground leads somewhere else. And the thing is that the making and creating of knowledge is not a free business. It costs money to put it together and at least that money should be recovered.
Yeah.
And we end up then often being a little bit unfair to our authors, because then you can't get the money to pay them, and then they have a toss up between, okay, our book is getting out but we are not getting paid. So it's a complex business, and I think that is something that we have to consider. But otherwise, yes, and we've started doing ebooks. The pandemic led to that, because print books could not be done, and we were always doing ebooks, but we were not selling them ourselves. And now we sell them from our platform as well. And that's great, because it earns us a little money and it gets the books out.
Yes. So the same, again, the next question would be, which is natural. What can I, as a reader, do to support independent publishing house?
Well, of course, Rita said the most important thing, which is buy more books. I was nodding when she was saying that. But actually, Trisha, I think it's a really interesting and really important question, because in order to read the kind of books, or for the kind of books that people like us publish to get out and get accepted, I think readers have to read differently also. I think that they have to seek out different things. Sometimes those options are not easy. And say, for example, if you are publishing a book which comes from somebody who is writing in a dialect and you're publishing it in translation, that writer may be actually making a very radical breakthrough in the way they do twisting and turning of language. But for the reader, that might seem like a bad translation.
Yeah.
And there is somewhere that you have to understand historically where that writing is coming from and meet the author halfway. Yes. And I think it's very important for readers to also realize that the assumptions you may have started out with as readers are not the same as you grow as readers. And that would really help, I think, for newer voices to be heard and read and listened to and accepted.
Yes, I actually have experienced this several times, because I'm interacting with readers quite a bit on the front line. And I've really understood that the change is also not easy. It takes time for you to grow into newer voices and everything. And just buying books cannot really make an impact that we are trying to do. It has to be read, most importantly. So when we're talking about reading, you've spoken about translation, but could you tell us a little bit about how to understand, how do you get these authors? How do you check for authenticity of these voices?
Rita?
Yeah, this is for you.
This for me?
Yes.
Or Rita, for me?
No, this is for you.
Okay. I think the thing is, what I was saying that readers need to do, which is to learn to read differently, to look differently, to search differently. We also have to do that, because of course, those options are easy for us. So, when we started out as feminist publishers and we started to publish women, it would have been very easy for us to basically publish English-speaking, Western-educated urban women and still feel that we were going against the grain and we were doing something different, which would not have been untrue, but we couldn't have stopped there. So in order to then look for voices which are not mainstream, or which are not urban, or which are not the usual suspects, you have to go much further, and you have to keep an eye open for what is being written, be in touch with people on the ground. I think for us, the big advantage was that Zubaan grew out of the feminist movement in India. And we already were in contact with activist groups on the ground all over the country. And it was a lot of support and knowledge from them that kind of entered our publishing and made us think differently. And if I may, I'll give you a quick example of what is one of my favorite all-time books that we have published in Kali and later in Zubaan. And this was a book called Sharir Ki Jankari in Hindi. It was created by groups of rural women in Rajasthan working in a health program. And it's about the woman's body and how the body changes. But when they made the book, and they made it by hand, and they made 2 copies, and they experimented with it in the village, and everyone laughed at them, saying, this is not a realistic book because you never see a naked woman in a village and you've got a naked female body. So they went back and rethought, and they changed the illustrations wonderfully, making fully dressed women covered from head to toe in lehenga, choli, and orni. And then you lift up her lehenga with a little flap, and you see how she's made from inside. And you open doors and you see her breasts and so on. And when they brought this book to us, we were so excited. And they made 2 conditions for us. One of them was that we would not sell the book to a village woman at a profit. We would sell it at cost. The other one was that 75 of them had written the book, and all 75 had to be acknowledged on the cover as authors.
Okay.
And that was my first unlearning of all the knowledge that we had been taught about authorship, and which is always seen as individual or 2 people or 3 people. So in a sense, when you start listening to voices from the margins, you have to unlearn a lot of things you've learned, and you have to learn to listen differently. And I think over the years, we've had to teach ourselves that.
Yes. Unlearning. That's what I'm doing at this point of time as well. But when I caught up with Ruby, and I read one of her articles on Scroll, and she'd written, I run Adivaani like we are in perpetual crisis. And so I asked her a question. As an independent publisher with a strong voice, what is your biggest challenge in publishing a book? So can we play video number 2?
To answer the question of our biggest challenges in publishing a book, I'd like to clarify that Adivaani is not just a publishing house, but an archiving and documentation outfit for Adivasi expression in multiform and through diverse interventions. Publishing is just one of our undertakings. An independent publisher or cultural practitioner is mostly a dependent one, and for a one-person editorial and pre-press team, the only external services we rely on in our line of bookmaking is the printing. Printing is a financial concern, which becomes our main challenge, as in-house work is undertaken voluntarily. I don't come from money, neither from social capital. I didn't have a startup fund, and neither have a corpus fund. Most of my reading and writing since Adivaani has been for calls for funding proposals and applying for them, and not being deterred by the rejections. I started Adivaani not as a business venture, but as one for Adivasi preservation, and my social, cultural, economic location meant I had to adapt, customize, and shape my own models of working and production, and this already sets us up for distinctive challenges. Almost all our books are stuck in the ready-for-print stage. While I have been productive in other aspects of our work, no new book to show in 3 years is telling of our distinctive challenges to publishing.
So Rita, the next question is to you. As mentioned by Ruby, printing was one of our biggest challenges. Apart from low readership and of course the similar problems, do you think, what are your challenges specific? I'm very keen on understanding your distribution problems. How difficult is it to distribute books from the the geographical region? Because for me to reach out to Northeast is slightly difficult, but I want to understand vice versa. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so as I was just listening to Ruby's talk as well, I was thinking, yeah, printing is one of the problems that we face here as well, because we don't have, a good number of printing presses here. So
Okay.
there's one that does the entire thing, but we usually have our books printed from Guwahati. So that's quite a long process. Like we send them, and then they transporting the books to us. It's quite a long wait. And apart from that, the distribution part, it's not really organized here. As in, we don't have book distributors as such, I think. So what we normally do for our books is keep them in the few bookstores that we have here in Kohima, Dimapur, and a few scattered places in the other districts. And because, as I mentioned earlier, like our market is very limited here in the state, but if there are people who wants to buy our book from outside the state, we usually recommend that they buy it online from Amazon or an e-commerce site, which we have here in Nagaland as well, that ships everywhere across the country. So
what is the name of the site?
Islandlaw.com. ILANDLO.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, please carry on. Sorry, I just thank you for that link. I can't hear you. I lost you.
I think
Yeah,
yeah.
I think I muted myself.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. We have very few proper bookstores here in Nagaland. Like for instance, in Kohima, I can literally count them. Maybe two, Crossword and another independent bookstore which started last year. So the other stores that we keep our books are normally, you know, clothing stores or jewelry stores, you know, all those places.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually a very interesting strategy. I was just exploring the French market, how they distribute their books, and they have these leisure stores, and they try and cross-sell their books. If it's a sports book, they sell it with sports. So I think that's the learning that I am getting today.
Even cafes as well. Yeah, a lot of cafes are here, so we keep our books in those places as well.
Which is interesting. But one more question. I think we are running out of time, but I have two questions overall for the thing. But one question, as Urvashi ma'am said, read differently. I want to focus on the oral literature, which is very, very important in the Northeast, and especially I think in Nagaland as well. There is some conscious documentation being done. And as a matter of fact, I know some of them have been done by Sahitya Academy and NBT as well in the past. But as an independent publishing house, what role does an independent publishing house play, like yours, play in this regard?
Yeah, so growing up, I remember like sitting around the fireside and listening to my grandparents narrate folktales to us. Sadly, that tradition is fading now, and children of today's generation will hardly encounter this warm, beautiful experience. Personally, I have been blessed to listen to stories that especially my grandmother would narrate, and I've had some of them recorded in the hope to publish them someday. One of my favorite stories titled Shoposho, that talks about a special kind of friendship between a tiger and a young boy, is already been published under the imprint of Penthrill as a Naga folktale children's book. Other than that, we have collaborated with the Naga Heritage Center in publishing the first volume of People's Stories, a collection of stories and traditional teachings gathered from Naga elders, written and compiled by Avinyo Kire and Meneno Bamuzor. These are a few of the initiatives we have also taken in documenting the oral tradition of literature that has been passed on from generations to generations. We hope to publish more of such books in the days to come.
Okay. Also, just before it struck me, we should talk about collaborations. Do you think collaboration with another publishing house, maybe a multinational or any publishing house like that, could also help increase the visibility of the work that you are doing, the kind of work that you're doing?
Why not? I'm sure that will help a lot.
Then I'll have to get in touch with you very soon.
Yes, please.
With that, I think we're shooting out. We're really late. But my question to Urvashi ma'am, if I had not known better, I would have actually asked you to select your favorite book. But for me, all my books are my favorite. So, but if you have to share a list of, say, 5 books, which is perhaps representative of your publishing portfolio, what would those be? Because I know you have a Northeast list as well, specifically dedicated to that region. So 5 books, perhaps?
That's a really tough one. I can't think of 5. I think all of them, I mean, I love every single book we do. So I'm going to cheat on your question and say all the books from the Northeast as one, all the books we do from Kashmir as one, all the books we do by Dalit women as one, all the books we do by queer and trans writers as one.
Yes.
And that's 4 lots. That would be, I think, that should do it. And all the translations we do.
Yes, so that's why I said 5, because I'm aware of all 5 of them.
Yes, but not 5 books. It would be really tough to find 5
yes,
books.
and I'll mention some of my favorites. I think the one from Manipur, that translation, I was in Manipur then when this book was launched. The collection of short stories.
Crafting the Word.
Crafting the Word. That was one of my favorites. Even the book on the short stories from Nagaland, they were also my favorite. Then Baby Haldar being one of them. And there's so many, I can't even start naming them. Yeah, but some of them I absolutely remember. So definitely I've named them. I'll write down the names if later on as well. But Rita, can you name a couple of your books? Like you've mentioned one, and that's most interesting because I like how nature is very strong, how it's intertwined with our literature and oral culture. So I like that book. I actually read about it. I have to get it, and I will in due course of time. But some of your books that you'd like the people from the rest of the India would also be able to relate to them, something like that.
Yeah, so like Urvashi mentioned, I think I like all the books that we have published also, but maybe, and it would depend on your interest for which kind of book, but maybe you could check out People's Stories, which I mentioned earlier. This book captures and documents the riches of Naga oral literature with stories ranging from the early days in Naga history and traditional teachings gathered from Naga elders.
Yeah.
The other book would be Where Tiger Comes to Town by Kaja Kelekwiso.
Yes.
This book would take you back to, to the Kohima of the 80s and the 90s. And if you're interested in poetry, I would recommend Love, Lust, and Loyalty by Yumi Vashum, a writer from Ukhrul, Manipur. This book is a collection of poetry that talks about coping with sexual abuse as a kid, of falling in love, and of heartbreaks. You might also be interested in The Morning Years by Nini Lungalang, which is also one of our latest books, which was published posthumously.
Okay. Now, my reason behind asking this question was, since we are talking about reading differently and being more informed and diverse readers, this would perhaps be a starting point for a lot of readers who haven't yet consciously made a decision. So that's why this question I felt was important. And yes, with this, I'll have to stop talking and take some questions from the audience.
Trisha, can I step in here? I just want to, because Ruby is not here, I would just want to say that Adivaani also has some lovely books which everybody should look into, especially their children's book about the creation of a Santhal. That's beautiful. And I think she's still waiting to complete the 3rd book, which is illustrated and ready. She doesn't have the funds to print it. But the first 2 are printed and they are absolutely gorgeous. So I think if we need to read something, pick one thing from Adivaani, it would be the creation story.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. That's great. It is a beautiful book. Yeah.
Yes. So we have to take questions, and how do I?
So can you see the Q&A box at the bottom right?
There's a chat.
There's a Q&A. Can you see the Q&A box?
Yes.
So that's filled with questions. Yeah.
Okay. This is by Neerath. What are the 2 or 3 tangible things that can be done to help people read better? Would anybody, like Urvashi ma'am, would you like to take this?
I think, I don't know whether there is a way in which one can help people to read better. I think it's the readers themselves who have to perhaps cultivate a different kind of curiosity and look really beyond the obvious. So if you go into a bookshop, I would not really look at the books that are out there in the front line, put, the ones that are selling the best, but go and seek out stuff in their bookshelves, which is perhaps hidden from view. Ask the bookshop staff to advise you on newer things, the kind of voices you're looking for. If there is a women's shelf, if there is a shelf of, marginalized voices, tribals, Dalits, others, you have to seek out these things and look at them. Read, go to different websites and read what is on the net, and that will also lead you to some interesting links. These are some ways I can think of at the top of my head. But I'm sure there will be others. You'll just have to discover them. I mean, when I started, I just decided I wasn't going to read anything other than books by women. And so for a long time, I only read women. And in that way, I discovered a lot more than I would have otherwise done.
Sometimes I think the reading challenge is something that has taken the new generation by a storm. So we are constantly challenging ourselves to also read differently. I think there have been some very good reading challenges which are helping readers to integrate new reading, and one would be that by House of Belongg itself. They have done one beautifully curated and thoughtful reading challenge. I think there are so many small things that we are doing right now on the internet that perhaps we can bring about that noticeable difference. Then there is a question for Ruby that we will take a little later because she's not here to answer. This is by Roshni Subramaniam, I guess. It's a Subramani. As a student who is thinking to take up a course on editing and publishing, my question is to Urvashi ma'am. Are there any suggestions that you would like to give to someone who wants to step into the world of the same? As in, how can you approach the field altogether?
With curiosity and excitement, I think. And I don't think there's any thing that you have to carry with you into the field or any suggestions on how you can get into the field. But I would say, remember that it's very, very exciting. It is an area like no other because you're constantly in touch with new ideas, but it's also damn hard work. So it's no cakewalk. So people think that if they can just read, they can also become good editors and good publishers. That's not the case. It's a craft. You have to really work hard at it.
It wouldn't have come from anybody better. I couldn't have thought of somebody better to answer that question any day. This is by Neerath. What is the role that book reviews and review journals play or can play to draw more attention to independent publishers and books in these catalogs? Book reviews and review journals.
Should we ask Rita?
Yes, Rita, would you like to answer these? How can book reviews help you reach out to more audience?
Yeah, I think book reviews play a very important role. It's like free advertising for the book, and the more you help spread the word about the book, and the more people are familiar with a new book, I think they're more interested in checking it out and buying it. So that way, I guess it helps a lot in the sales.
Yeah, definitely. But I won't agree that it is free because we actually have to send the books to all. But having said that, it is perhaps the best way to connect with the discerning audience. Okay. The next question, Trisha, what about your list of 5 books? Okay. But I am actually, because I had a motive behind asking that question, I mentioned 5 books very recently published, not very recently published, but my first recommendation would be what I feel is one of my favorite books is White Crane, Lend Me Your Wings. Now, because it's a Tibetan fiction, and we haven't read much about Tibetan voices. And so it is written by the founding father of Tibetan fiction writing in English. And I love that book. It talks about displacement and their voices and how they have been longing to go back. And it's a different voice that we need to read. Second would be Shamboli. It is translated from Kannada. It is a biography, autobiography of a what do you say, a manual scavenger, and how he became how he entered the literary scenes in Kannada, and he was quite well respected for his writing as well. Then the third would be Beasts of Burden by Imayam, translated from Tamil. I'm also working on a new book called Generations. It's not a new book, but I'm going to publish it in the month of June, July. It's called Generations, again translated from Tamil. It's about generations of perpetration of certain traditions which we need to break out perhaps today. We have to break out of it. Not going into the details of it yet. And maybe this one, A Plate of White Marble by Bani Basu, translation from Bangla, talks about widows and the status of widows in our society. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was just going through the special days marked by UN, and there is a day marked for widows. But we haven't seen much difference. I was trying to figure out what is the difference. I don't think there has been much difference till date. There is a lot of social stigma which still goes around. Anyway, next question. Is there a common platform to access all the works of regional writers that write in English? I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think there is any platform like that. Would you know, Rita or Urvashi ma'am?
No.
I am not aware of one.
Yeah, nothing like that I know of also. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I would just say, I sometimes worry about our use of the word regional because it kind of makes the writers seem like they are something less than the national. I think they're all actually just writers, or so I would just say don't call them regional.
Indian writers.
Writers, yeah.
Now the next question, Rita, also because you've published poetry and you mentioned it today, what is expected of a poetry manuscript?
That's a very hard question. I think it should just contain poems, primarily, and then we'll check out and see if it's good enough to be published.
I think I know where this question is coming from, because a lot of mainstream publishers, including me, not excluding myself, we do not publish poetry. For me, I find it economically unviable for me. I haven't done it. I don't think I can do it just yet. And that is where perhaps this question is coming here today. What is expected of a poetry manuscript? So, Urvashi ma'am, would you be able to say anything on this?
Well, I mean, like all choices, what you eventually publish is subjective, even though you even though you use certain criteria to judge whether it's a manuscript worth publishing. But like you, Trisha, we also don't publish poetry. We publish historical poetry. So we've done Kashmiri historical poets or Andal and things like that. But it's difficult in the sense that often poetry is very, very personal and to be able to judge whether this is within quotes good or not is really difficult. Secondly, often poetry manuscripts are very slim.
Yeah.
And that makes it difficult to publish them for many strange kind of practical reasons, partly because they don't have a spine or they have a very small spine and they disappear inside bookshops. They don't show up because bookshops don't have the space to put them front up. Then it makes the pricing very difficult because you have to price in a way that you can give the distributor their discount, you can give the retailer their discount. And if it's a very slim book, you can't do that. Or at least you can't do it when you're selling it in the traditional way. So for all of these reasons, publishers shy away from poetry quite a lot. And I think that in today's day and age, it seems to me that getting poetry out and talking about and reading on the internet is a very interesting way of doing it. So when a lot of that gets done, then it also makes it harder to take the decision to publish.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't think we have any more questions just now. With this, I would like to close the session so that we can carry on. But thank you very much, Urvashi ma'am, Rita. Ruby, I'm sure she's not here, but I'll thank her personally. INC, I think INC, I'm used to calling it INC, Indian Novels Collective, and House of Belongg for organizing this one-day festival of inclusivity. I hope more people, as ma'am said, would read differently. That is the need of the hour. Without sounding I think I'm sounding very pedantic at this point of time, so I'm just going to stop and let our readers decide for themselves. Thank you once again for being a lovely audience, and thank you once again to all the panelists here.
Trisha, thanks Belongg and INC.
Thank you, Trisha. Thank you, Urvashi ma'am. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all the great questions to all the attendees, and thank you for staying with us.